Welcome to our midweek podcast, the midweek mailbag, as I guess we're going to start calling it. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the managing editor. I'm the producer at Pride of Detroit / editor-in-chief. You can find me at Detroit Online. With me this week to fill in for Eric, who couldn't be here this week, is senior editor at Pride of Detroit, co-host of the PODcast, co-host of First Bite, Ryan Matthews, at Ryan_POD on Twitter. Ryan, thanks for joining in.
I know this is a basketball analogy, but all of us watched The Last Dance, right? I'm feeling a lot like Scottie Pippen. And I appreciate that. That's my role. I enjoy it.
Hey, if that makes me Michael Jordan, I like that analogy.
Well, I think Eric's Michael Jordan. I think you're more Phil Jackson. Do you like that?
He had a pretty good mustache.
He did.
I don't know why I'm talking like he's dead. He's not dead. I don't think. I'm not trying to break news here.
But he might not have a mustache anymore.
That might be true. Yeah. Anyways, if this is your first time joining us, we're not going to talk about Phil Jackson the entire time, as much as maybe we would want to. We're here to answer your questions live. If you're watching us live here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit, you can throw some comments in the chat, and we'll try to answer those. If you aren't able to join us live, always hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag AskPOD. In fact, that's where we're going to start today, because we had a bunch of good questions come in right before we went live. And it's interesting because I don't know if this is a sign of the psyche of a normal Detroit Lions fans, but I have some people complaining about the offense. Maybe not complaining, but worried about the offense, specifically two players on offense. And no, Ryan, it's not Jared Goff. Let's start with DJ Chark. Shutout of catches in last week's game against the Commanders. Are you at all concerned about the start for DJ Chark so far?
I don't know if I'm concerned about DJ Chark as much as I'm concerned about his usage. Okay. I think that the promise was coming into the season that the Lions would get somebody who is a vertical threat, right? Somebody who can stretch the field outside the margins, outside to the boundaries, and that the Lions would also get somebody that would be a big red zone target too, right? Sure. Now I'm trying to think really just kind of off the top of my head. I don't have the data in front of me, but in terms of red zone, right, it seems like the Lions are much more committed to trying to pound the rock in. There's been a lot of running. There's been a lot of Jamal Williams. There's been a lot of DeAndre Swift. And most recently, I think back to the Washington game, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yep. He's the benefactor of some red zone targets. So I think maybe more so I'm concerned about Chark's usage. I'm not so much concerned about DJ Chark. And I think it's kind of reminiscent of the concern that people used to have about Marvin Jones. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like Marvin Jones was a guy who he was there one week and then the next week maybe he showed up in the box score for like 2 catches and 20 some odd yards. Maybe that's just DJ Chark. He's the new Marvin Jones, maybe.
I think so. I mean, I think this sort of like complaint or worry is going to pop up every few weeks about someone on the Lions offense just by nature of having so many weapons, right?
Yeah.
But I think there might be something to be said about just the warming chemistry between Goff and Chark. And listen, I know we all said it during training camp, like it looked hot and it looked like they had everything going and rolling. And to a degree, that's true, but it's different when it's game speed, right? It's different when there's real defenders. As the players like to say, it's different when the bolts are flying. And so I think it's fair to wonder if maybe the chemistry is just not there yet, because it's not like he's not getting targeted. He had a couple deep shots where Goff probably should have hit him and would have been big explosive play. I mean, the guy had a touchdown last week. Let's not act like he's a complete disappearing act, and he probably should have had, I believe he was one of the targets on that red zone trip that they turned it over on downs, where he probably should have hit it there. And I don't know if he has a touchdown in back-to-back games, are we concerned about him at all? Probably not.
No, probably not. Yeah, that's probably a good point. I think you bring up a good point, though. And I think maybe somebody else who might be suffering from this, and I don't want to touch on it too much, especially if there's a question about it, but like TJ Hockenson's also kind of suffering from this too, right?
That was going to be the follow-up question too. And yeah, let's move to TJ Hockenson, because I think maybe there's a little bit more legit concern about the way he's been playing so far.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe all phases of his game too, right? Sure. Like last week against the Commanders, I know he gets charged with a quarterback pressure in pass blocking, and he also has 2 drops, and that's really concerning, because here's the thing with Hockenson, and it's also true about Chark, and maybe some of the other kind of peripheral skill position players, but you're only going to get so many chances to get the ball. You're only going to get so many targets, right? Like the guys that you can count on to get heavy usage each week are going to be Amon-Ra and DeAndre Swift as long as he's healthy. But like beyond that, I mean, you're really in a competition with a bunch of other guys to get opportunities, and it's only going to get slimmer when JMO is healthy, you know? So
right.
I think the concern about Hockenson is I think it's warranted. I do think it's warranted.
Yeah, I think it is too. And it's not like, okay, now the Lions have a horrible tight end, but I mean, there is this lingering conversation that's kind of hanging over everyone's head like, okay, are the Lions going to re-sign this guy or what? And I know they have the 5th-year option to roll out next year, right? There's still one more year in his contract, I believe, because of that 5th-year option. But, you know, this is around the time you'd be considering giving that guy an extension, and it's something that they said they've even been thinking about at one point. And yeah, he's not proving. And I think you bring up a really good point. Like when the ball is going to be spread out so thinly, you better make the most of the opportunities you have. And Hockenson, I think, clearly hasn't done that. I mean, he had one really good catch on that very important touchdown drive in the 4th quarter, and it was a good catch. It wasn't an easy catch to make, but that's also one we've seen him drop at least 2 times this year. And I think he, if I'm not mistaken, he leads the team in drops. I know that's an unofficial stat, but I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of time for him to rebound, and given that I think his blocking in general is still just kind of meh. You know, it's not a high end blocker like I think maybe we thought we were getting out of that Iowa tree of great tight ends. But yeah, if your blocking is just meh and your catching is suddenly not as good as what's expected of you, then well, suddenly maybe you're not a top 10 tight end. And again, 2-game sample size. Let's not count them out yet, but I would say it's fair to call it a disappointing start for him.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to our live chat here. Katie from Michigan asks, your opinion of Julian Okwara this game. I'm still kind of diving into the defensive tape myself, but did you have any impressions of Julian Okwara after maybe the initial watch?
You know, I think the thing that stood out about Okwara is that, in Julian specifically, right, is that, again, well, first and foremost, let's talk about him being active, right? Sure. Like the decision to put him on the 53 roster for game day, I think was part of the plan, because you look at what Detroit wanted to do for a second consecutive week. You know, in the first week against Philadelphia, they generate 19 pressures. In week 2 against the Commanders, they generate 31. If you want to put pressure to Carson Wentz, if you want to put his feet to the fire, Julian Okwara is one of the guys that you want out there. And I mean, look, he was 3rd for Detroit in pressures with 4. And I know he got I know he had 4 hurries, but it seemed like he was real close to getting some quarterback hits on some plays. And he was really, I think he was effective. And that's what you're going to count on Julian Okwara to do, right? Is to generate pressure. That's going to be his sole role.
Well, here's the thing that sorry to jump in here, but the thing that I think puts him in over a guy like Austin Bryant, Austin Bryant inactive for this game because of Julian Okwara, but a pretty good pass rusher.
Right.
But here's the thing, he doesn't bring what Julian brings, and this is what I wanted to bring up, because I've only watched the first half, the all 22 of the first half, and the initial thing that poked out for me with Julian Okwara is how much they dropped him into coverage. And listen, the one thing that I think Aaron Glenn really deserves a strong pat on the back for is his ability to diagnose and come up with blitzing schemes that confuse the defense or the offense. And when you have a guy like Julian Okwara who can do both, who can rush the passer and drop into coverage, well, suddenly you don't know what the hell he's going to do when he's out there. And that becomes a big weapon in and of itself. Now, was he good in coverage? Not particularly this game, but it's something that's in his wheelhouse more so than I think any other edge defender on this team, right?
Well, I mean, we saw what that looks like when other edge defenders are trying to keep up with Curtis Samuel, right? And maybe it's unfair to say that, hey, Julian Okwara would have handled that a lot better than Charles Harris, but like I see what you're saying. I think another stat that is pretty revealing and interesting to consider too with Julian Okwara so far through, and I mean this was only his first game that he had an opportunity to play, But something that you talked about in the podcast, Jeremy, was okay, the Lions are scheming up a lot of pressure. I want to see some guys winning some one-on-one stuff, right?
Right.
Julian Okwara has a 58.3 win percentage on blocking versus on non-penalty pass rush snaps. So like his percentage of quote unquote wins versus blocking on non-penalty pass rush snaps. And that's the highest on the team. Now, granted, he has, just one game and it's a small sample size, but like this is a guy who can win one-on-one and they can trust him in a different way than they can trust Austin Bryant. And it'll be interesting to see how they balance those two guys, especially once some other guys get healthy. I mean, what about Josh Pascal?
Right.
I mean, how does he fit into the equation? So it's interesting to see how this develops.
All right. It's Tuesday, which across the NFL is notoriously power rankings day. So clearly, Kev asked, the Athletic released new power rankings today that had the Lions 14th. Too high, too low, or just right? And in fact, that's not the highest. I saw a 12th amongst the power ranking kind of groupings today. So let's start with 14th. What are your thoughts on Lions at 14th in the league?
Well, I'm gonna immediately throw this back to you because as the resident Viking fan on staff, how much of an impact did last night's game, Philly versus Minnesota, kind of impact your feelings about the Lions? Because I mean, that's the Lions' opponent next week in Minnesota, and it's the Lions' week 1 opponent that they really. I mean, it was a hard fought game, right? I mean, it was a narrow loss in week 1. How are you feeling about the Lions after last night's Monday Night Football game?
I mean, it's impossible not to feel at least a little better, right? And listen, I'm not one to play the transitive property game where it's like, okay, if this team beat this team and we beat that team, that means we're better than this team. Like, that's not really how the NFL works since it's such a matchup-based game. But the Eagles look damn good, man. And I said it in the lead up to that game. I thought they're kind of a sleeper Super Bowl contender, and they haven't done anything to dissuade my opinion on that yet. And so, sure, you feel good with the Lions hanging with them now. The Eagles were at home last night, and the Lions were at home in week 1, so that kind of factors into the equation a little bit. But kind of looking at more on the Minnesota side, it's a healthy reminder that, they're still a young team too. They're still in year 1 of their new head coach and their new GM, and not everything is going to work right away. That being said, the Lions don't have a Darius Slay. Like, I've never seen Justin Jefferson get locked down like that. And the Lions are just not going to be capable of doing that. What they will be capable of doing, I think, is what really made Kirk Cousins look bad at the end of that game, which is just bring the heat and make him just throw up prayers all over the place. And here's where I get to like the part where I feel uncomfortable with how optimistic I am about this team right now, because I think the Lions are set up I think their philosophy on defense makes a lot of sense with the personnel they have, because I think they have really good run defending linebackers, and that can get them into really fortuitous downs on third down. If they can stop the run on first and second down, suddenly you're staring at a third median, third and long. And Aaron Glenn is being an aggressive defensive coordinator so far this year and dialing up blitzes and showing different looks. And that's like a recipe to get a lot of 3 and outs. And we saw it in the first half against Washington. And listen, I think that might be the key to beat the Vikings too. If you can stop their running game, if you can stop Dalvin Cook, which is exactly what the Eagles did last week. And that's another thing maybe to feel positive about. Dalvin Cook got stopped in his tracks last night. DeAndre Swift went off against the Eagles. And so that's another kind of a check mark. It's like, okay, maybe the Lions run game is for real. We're starting to build a pretty steady case that this Lions run game is legit. But anyways, going back to the defense, if you can stop Dalvin Cook and make it so that, Kirk, you put the game in Kirk Cousins' hands, well, there are worse things than being able to do that. And again, like, good receiving core, Lions defensive backs are going to have to stand up. But we were saying the exact same things about Washington, and it took a while for them to get going. And even if they did, like, I don't feel like the Lions got torn up by Washington's set of receivers. So maybe they have a fighting chance against the Vikings.
I think the defense thing that you bring up is something to key in on, Jeremy, in terms of what Aaron Glenn's been willing to do in terms of scheming up blitzes and scheming pressure. How much confidence does that put in his secondary? I mean, he's going 0 on a lot of these plays.
You're right.
Like, I mean, he's like, hey, we'll man up on the back end. We're just going to send 5-6 dudes and we're gonna man up outside, and we're gonna let our defensive backs do what we think we can do, cover long enough for the pressure to get home.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you're about to face a team like Minnesota, and like you said, it seemed like the recipe last night for Philadelphia was like, hey, we're going to get after a rather immobile Kirk Cousins. We're going to make him feel uncomfortable. And I mean, the dude threw 3 picks. So
Probably should have been 5 or 6.
right, I know. So I don't know. Just I guess to answer the original question, you look around the league. There's a handful of teams that are still undefeated, right? So, I mean, I'm not the Buffalo Bills are just in the class of their own, right? Like they are the class of the NFL. The Dolphins, what they did against, I think, is a really good Ravens team,
Sure.
is super impressive, and they did that on the road nonetheless. The Chiefs are really good. I think the Chargers are really good. The Eagles are 2-0. They seem to be like maybe the toast of the NFC. But I'm not I'm I'm not thinking 12. I'm not thinking 14 is too high for the Lions right now.
It's tough because like we played this game after week 1 where it's just like, can you name 7 teams better than the Lions in the NFC?
Well, we're talking playoffs there, right?
Right.
Like that's essentially what we're talking about.
Well, right, because that 12 to 14 range, those are your wild card teams.
Yeah.
And so in the AFC, like this team is not a contender. I think we can all pretty comfortably say that. There's a lot of really good teams in the AFC, but in the NFC, it's just like, I mean, if the Giants can be 2-0, this can't be a good conference, right? Like, I don't know. I don't want. It's obviously way too early to start talking wild card, but I think that's a lot more possible than maybe them winning the division or anything like that, which is not a bad thing to say.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. We'll leave any sort of playoff talk there because it's way too early.
September 20th. This is what happens when the Lions win a game in September.
Right? Like we immediately start talking playoffs. I almost wrote an article because Football Outsider put initial playoff odds and the lines are at like 42%. And I'm like, oh, okay. I can take that.
I'll take a coin flip.
Yeah, right? Speaking of Football Outsiders, interesting question here from Devoted to Detroit on Twitter. He asked, what statistics measurements are best suited to be used when looking at a team's offense, defense, and special teams? This is obviously kind of like a personal preference type of thing, but he throws out DVOA, yards per play, EPA, which is expected points added, or anything else. What's your favorite? I guess when let's do it on kind of a macro level, like when you want to see offensive rankings. What is your efficiency statistic of choice?
Yeah, for me personally, I think it's DVOA. It's been DVOA for a long time. I think that in terms of measuring efficiency, that's the place that I go to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that you could even talk about it a little bit better just because of what you write each week for on paper and stuff.
Yeah, DVOA is definitely my favorite, and even at its most basic, which is where it's at right now, because it's not DVOA stands for defense adjusted value over expected, but it's not defensive adjusted. It's not defense adjusted, which basically means opponent adjusted. So that's the thing I like about it the most is like, okay, you gave up 200 rushing yards to the Eagles, but that's the Eagles. They're really, really good. So let's maybe scale that back and put it in its proper context. That's what that stat does. But even without that, it puts every single play into context. A 6-yard gain on a 3rd and 7 isn't worth as much as a 2-yard gain on 3rd and 1.
Yeah,
which makes sense,
exactly.
right? Like all that sort of stuff makes sense, but you don't see that in traditional box scores. When you score a touchdown down 35 points, it doesn't count as much as scoring one down 6 points. And so, and I'm not just saying this because I'm about to lead into what the DVOA stats say about the Lions so far, which is that they're the 9th best team, the 7th best offense, I think, and the 23rd, I want to say, best defense, which is, I think that's fair though, right? Because you look at all like the big stats, right? You look at, points allowed, you look at yardage allowed, and this Lions defense looks like it's the exact same as it was last year. It looks horrible. But we all saw that first half last week, right? And that matters. That matters. And the fact that they gave up a lot of points at the end of the game, we can't throw it out and say, oh, it's all garbage time points from Washington. I don't think that's accurate. But it also doesn't matter as much as if those points had come in the first half. And I think DVOA does a really good job kind of highlighting all of that and really including what matters in a statistic, which can be really hard to do.
Yeah, the situational stuff I think is really important that you pointed out, because I think that's what makes it such a unique and revealing stat for sure. So, but yeah, I mean, do we want to just touch on the fact that the Lions are ranked where they are in DVOA real quick? Because how long has it been? How long has it been since the Lions have been talked about like this? And then the second part of that question is, are the Lions at 23rd in defensive DVOA? Is that where they're at?
I believe so. Let me double check really quick.
Yeah, go ahead and double check.
It's right around there. No, I'm sorry. I'm way off. It's 17th.
Oh my God. Okay, so prior here's my ultimate question. If I told you that 2 weeks into the season the Lions were an average NFL defense and a top 10 offense in DVOA.
Right. I feel like we talked about this all offseason. We were like, if they could get there, we're 100% in. Like, this is a borderline playoff team if they get there. And so
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is the 17th best defense. But if they play if what we saw in that first half last week happens one or two more times over the next before the bye week, then suddenly you got me believing. And again, like as much as I raised my eyebrow when Kelvin Shepard said last week, like, who can run on us between the tackles, I'm starting to believe, man. I really am, because Malcolm Rodriguez is a dude.
Yeah, he is.
And Alex Anzalone is playing well too. And it's weird. But you know who the highest graded defender on the team is right now?
Who is it?
It's Chris Board. Their linebackers are playing so much higher than expectations, and with a fairly disruptive front. Again, I think the defensive line hasn't reached its full potential yet. Like, that changes so much, and Jeff Okudah is playing well. Tracy Walker is playing really well. They're getting a lot of really good individual performances on defense, and it's starting to turn me into a believer, which is, again, a little scary.
Dude, I want to tell you right now too, and I don't know if it's just the Honolulu Blue High that I'm riding right now. I have a strong sense that, like, Romeo Okwara is going to come back sometime this year.
It could change things, man.
It really could. I mean, I'm reading too much. This is a tinfoil hat thing. I am not doing a good job representing Eric Schlitt right now. I am so sorry about that.
No, you're being optimistic. It's perfect. That's Eric.
I have a tinfoil hat theory that we can talk about in between segments, but go ahead. Want to get one more question in?
No, let's take a break. Let's take a cold shower here,
because
I think we're getting a little out of control.
Power rankings, DVOA. Oh my goodness.
And when we come back, we're going to answer more of your Lions questions here live on Twitch, twitch.tv/PrideDetroit, on the midweek mailbag. We'll be right back. Okay. Whew. Yeah, we got. I mean, there is something deep inside me that thinks this team could do something this year.
Yeah. I think that somebody should clip that. Well, no, just so that you have receipts of saying on September 20th that the Lions could be something, and then we're in January, they're in a playoff game.
This is the part where I toot my own horn for being wrong last year when the Lions were like 0-6, and I was like, this team is still going to win 4 games. And then they won 3.5.
Yeah.
And I did, what did I pay 50 gifted subs or something for that? Something crazy.
I don't know. It was something wild.
All right. Before we get to your conspiracy theory, and I appreciate all the tinfoil hats in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Let me get to some of the subscriptions during that segment. Austin Mammoth, thank you for the follow, and then using the Twitch Prime sub. Appreciate that. Always love to see newcomers to the chat. Katie for Mission with the 24 months, 2 years, says NFC North champions. Here we come. Okay, I never said that. Let's scale it back from there. I still think the Packers are going to be really good. Lions for us with the 23 months, says the Shark is waiting to make the kill when we are in the deep. That's right. The mixed metaphor that kicked off Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
BW the Kid with the 21 bits. Appreciate that. Joshua Mercer gifting a sub to Ungrateful Ambo. Okay. Appreciate that, Joshua. Enjoy this on Ungrateful Lambo. Jay Garcia 1017 with the 4 months says drinking all the Kool-Aid. Oh yeah. Appreciate the 4 month subscribe to the channel. Jay Tez tier 1 sub, a newcomer. Thank you, Jay Tez. Appreciate your patronage and your subscription. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Pride. Enjoyed the ad-free experience. Uncle T-Rav, thank you for gifting a sub to Cave Mage. There we go. Words. Appreciate that. And then Flint Town and Down, one of our bigger subscribers and supporters as of late. 30 months now subscribed to the channel. Says the Dirty 30. Thanks, everybody. God, we are killing it with subs, guys.
Dude, do we need to change that sub goal to 500?
We absolutely do. I suppose I could do that very easily.
My goodness. Okay, well, hey, while you do that,
yes.
Give me 45 seconds to go full tinfoil hat. Okay, so here we go.
Let's hear it. Oh boy.
My wife, okay. My wife's cousin was the creator, and he is currently the co-creator or creator, I'm not sure, but he's like the lead designer for Simplified Clothing.
Okay, yeah.
They have the
like throwback lines.
Yeah, the partnership that they've done with the Lions, and if you can, because I think it's still only on sale at Ford Field.
Yeah, I think they sold out on. They had some online stuff, but I think it probably sold out real quick.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome clothing. The work that they did was great. Do you know who one of their models though was for their clothing?
Romeo. Okay.
Now, I understand you don't necessarily need an Achilles to be healed in order to put on a sweatshirt and stand in front of a camera.
Uh-huh.
But I still think that Romeo is in the franchise's eyes. I still think he's one of their star players. Like the players that they sent to go do that, like were Amon-Ra, Charles Harris, and Romeo Okwara. Like those are top flight names. Those are dudes, right?
Sure.
And there's just something about like the Lions are gonna have good luck this year. Like
oh boy, don't clip that.
Because here's the thing. I think we've got a lot of not a lot of, but I think we were dealt the biggest bad luck blow to begin the season. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure. Yeah. I mean,
the offensive line's gonna be all together, and then just boom, steel chair to the head. 2 weeks later, they're missing 3 of the players. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and Levi and Josh and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dude, there are good things that are happening right now. Like it's just really. So here's the thing to think about the Lions though, is like there's so many players that are just like waiting on the other side of injuries. Some of them I'm very concerned about, and maybe this can be something that we talk about at greater length. But like, I'm really worried about Levi and Sarike.
Of course, as you should.
I'm very concerned about that. Like back stuff, which, okay, that also makes me very concerned about Vaitai
and Damani.
Yes. Yes, to an extent. However, there's Jerry Jacobs. There's J-Mo, who's putting out videos of him running and cutting at pretty darn close to full speed, right?
Oh, God, here we go.
Like, hey, remember, I watched the goddamn Madison last week. I heard you say today would be a big day for Frank Ragnow if he doesn't end up on
IR.
Yeah. That's encouraging.
And Jonah, it's true.
The Lions are not at full strength.
And here, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna feed into it. Why not? Because
do it.
Look at the schedule, man. This is a tough week. But you got
a COVID side effect?
I don't know. You've got Seattle and New England on the other end of this game before your bye week. Those are 2 extremely winnable games. So even if you lose this one, you're potentially going 3-2 into the bye week, and that's when the cavalry comes back. Ideally, like I mean, we don't know when Josh Paschal is going to be. We can be pretty sure Jerry Jacobs is going to be ready. I would say. Actually, I want to save the injury stuff until because we did get a question about that, and we'll put that on the podcast. But safe to say, like the Lions can be in pretty good shape going into the bye week, potentially with the winning record, and that's with them losing this week in Minnesota. I think it's realistic to say they have a good shot at a winning record going into the bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
And considering that, they might not get these guys back right away after the bye, but a week or two later Dallas is your next challenge, which with or without Dak. Then you got Miami and Green Bay. You hope maybe some of the cavalry comes back for those two games because those are going to be big ones. Then it kind of lightens up again. Then you got Bears and Giants. And
then it gets into that December schedule, right? Which we circled that back when we talked about the schedule at large when it first dropped. And I
go on a run there. Yeah.
I remember being like, hey, the season could be decided in December.
And here's your December schedule. Jaguars, Vikings at home. Both those at home. Jets, Panthers, Bears, Packers. There are worse finishes to the season than that. I mean, that's 5 very winnable games and the Packers.
Man, you know that if Eric was here, you'd be doing the same thing, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Eric's all the way in. And there's a lot of Kool-Aids in the chat, and there are also a lot of tinfoil hats that I saw. Thank you so much.
Another DVOA statistic that I like that I don't really use as much is future schedule. So they rank the schedules that are left remaining, and it was a lot better earlier. Now it's 16th. I swear it was like 7th or something earlier, but maybe that didn't factor in Monday Night Football.
Average schedule.
Go ahead. And I feel like that's fair. You do have some really tough games against Miami and Buffalo and the Packers a couple times. And again, we'll see where Dallas is at with Dak. But
also too, I think we were all kind of circling the Giants earlier in the year and being like, oh, like that's gonna be a win. And I know that, I
still think it's gonna be a win.
it still could be a win, but I think right now what's getting factored in is the Giants are 2-0.
Right. Although, but they're 18th in DVOA though.
The Giants are?
Yeah.
Not as good as the Lions.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Football DVOA doesn't believe in them yet. The 0-2 Atlanta Falcons have a better DVOA than the Giants.
Come again? Say that one more time.
The 0-2 Atlanta Falcons have a better DVOA than the 2-0 New York Giants.
Wow. Okay. All right. For sure. They have played 2 close games.
Sure.
Yeah.
They gave away a game.
Yeah.
I don't. Jay Tez, I see you. I don't think there's any way we can get Dan Miller on a TV broadcast. That's not. I don't think he would even want it. Honestly, I don't know. That's a good question. Would Dan Miller want to be on a national broadcast?
On a national broadcast?
Yeah.
I don't think
it's an entirely different job.
Yeah, I don't think the nation deserves Dan Miller.
He's ours.
Yeah,
you're withholding.
I'll be frank. I don't think America deserves Dan Miller. Dan Miller deserves so much better. like if we can just shoot here for like a second, like Dan Miller is legitimately one of the nicest people that I've ever met in
he's a great dude.
Detroit sports. Like
100%.
I mean, that guy, I remember this was still when you were in California, but I went to the jersey reveal. Mm-hmm. And Dan Miller came up and introduced himself to me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And he's like, so who are you with? And I, said like Pride of Detroit. And he's like, oh yeah, I know you. Cause we're doing the, Dan Miller calls for,
right.
Especially in 2016, there were a lot of Dan Miller posts because there were a lot of games that came down to the end.
So many people have reached out to me this week asking for those posts again. And unfortunately, when they moved to night, they were on WJR or whatever before. Yeah. And WJR posted all the clips to their website. 97.1 doesn't do that. So
there's it's almost like 97.1. I won't say it.
I think you already did.
Did I? But yeah, but it was so cool. Like he came up and he like introduced himself to me, and then he also was just so kind and was like that like all the time. Yeah. Like when Alex and I were going in 2017, like whenever I would see him like in the elevator or something like that, like he would say hi. And
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of people like that in sports media.
There really aren't.
Especially with a guy who's like Dan Miller, dude. Like,
right.
Come on.
Yeah, no, he's I don't know if I'm telling us. No, it's fine. One of my daily pleasures is watching him and Mike O'Hara interact every single time, because they just like they give each other the biggest hug every time they see each other.
Really?
And just every time they walk up, they have to.
That makes me happy.
Dan does like a little, come on here, bring it in. And it's just it's that positive energy.
That's good stuff.
All right, we should get back into it.
Okay. Yeah.
So chat, keep bringing in the questions. I do have some backup ones on Twitter still if we need them, but I'd rather answer our live audience questions because you guys are the best. Let me just pull up the tweet really quick as well. Whoops. Right there. Okay. What's up, Brett? Welcome back to our midweek mailbag. I'm Jeremy here with our special guest, Ryan Matthews, filling in for Eric Schlitt this week. Thanks again for joining us, Ryan. Appreciate it, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, man.
All right, let's get back to the mailbag. Lantana, I've had a lot of Jeff Okudah questions, and understandably so. He asks, is Jeff Okudah considered back since he had 2 great games?
Yeah, 2 great games, I think, for different reasons, too. Mm-hmm. In game 1 against Philly, the guy was awesome. Had a 82.8 tackle rating from PFF and had a 72.3 run defense rating. And I believe he was second in the team in tackles that day, just behind Tracy Walker.
Yeah.
So that was super encouraging, right? Is to see like, oh, it's not just Jeff Okudah who's going to be the coverage guy. He's going to be the complete package, as he was kind of advertised when he was the Lions pick in 2020. So like, that's definitely a facet of his game that the Lions have to love, right? And then against the Commanders, Jeremy, he pretty much shuts down Terry McLaurin when him and Terry are lined up across from one another.
Yeah, that's no small task, right? Because I feel like a lot of times on especially early in the game when Washington was trying to go deep, I don't want to call some of those sacks coverage sacks, but they kind of were in some sense, and I think Jeff Okudah deserves a lot of credit for it. He earned a 72.1 coverage grade in that game, and yeah, like McLaurin was mostly a non-factor in this game. I know that sounds weird since he finished with 75 yards or something like that, but this was a Washington team, and I said it at the back of the last, like, we're about to face this pretty good Washington set of receivers. I feel like the Commanders were like Washington light, and the Lions passed that test, and Jeff Okudah deserves a lot of credit for that. He still hasn't gotten beat deep, which I think which should do a lot for his confidence, right? Because I feel like that was something that we saw happen far too often in those first 2 years, including the one game he played last year. Is he immediately gets beat deep, and everyone's like, oh my God, Jeff's horrible, and they've never been close to completing a deep one on him, right? He's been pretty blanketed coverage on all those guys, and the worst thing he's done really this entire season. I mean, he got a pass interference call that didn't end up counting because there was penalties on both teams, but I mean, there was that missed tackle on Terry McLaurin that I think I mentioned during the POD cast that almost turned into a big play. You hate to see that happen, but if that's the worst thing he's done through 2 weeks of the season, and you're an NFL cornerback where bad things happen to you all the time because that's just the nature of the position, you got to feel pretty darn good. Like it hasn't been perfect for Jeff Okudah, but in terms of like expectations for what we have to remember is like the 11th and 12th game of this guy's career, not to mention coming off of one of the most brutal injuries. I don't think expectations could have been higher than how he performed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would maybe argue that the worst thing that Jeff Okudah has done so far this season is not be on the field at the end cramps. Of the first half
right.
Against Philadelphia when Will Harris gave up that big completion to A.J. Brown. So, that's where they're at though, right? Like the Lions need Jeff Okudah, and they need Jeff Okudah to, keep playing how he's playing right now.
Fair enough. Next question, we'll go back to Katie. I think this is a good question. After 2 games, what position group needs the most improvement?
I think this might sound wild because Amon-Ra's in a class of his own, but the pass catchers.
Okay.
I think the pass catchers need to improve. The drops are troubling.
Sure.
I think they are definitely concerning from the standpoint of at least everybody's had some case of the dropsies. You know what I mean? Like yeah. Amon-Ra had it in game 1 against the Eagles. Hockenson, had a couple of passes that he normally catches. Swift had a drop.
DJ had one in the first game.
Yep, and Jamal had one in the first game. I think just as a whole, again, because, and this isn't my roundabout way to come back to like some Jared Goff slander, but it's that Jared Goff needs conditions to be perfect, right? And if players aren't catching passes on design plays, especially like when Goff starts moving out into space, and if they can't connect on those things and they can't keep the ball moving, well, then all of a sudden the offense is going to go into those lulls that it's gone into for 2 straight games. Yeah. So I think the pass catchers, there's definitely room for improvement with that group outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I think that's a great answer, honestly. And it feels like it's a cliche sometimes when teams say like, oh man, we could have had 50 today. But I feel like the Lions could have had 50 in both games, definitely the second game, maybe not so much the first game. Like this team could and probably should have more points than they do, and it's important to remember that like they could have settled for a field goal instead of go for it on 4th down, and they did. They went for 4th down at the end of the game too. So like they literally left points on the board to be a little more aggressive, which by the way I think is awesome. I love the aggressiveness really in both games so far from Dan Campbell, and I was concerned that maybe that wasn't going to be a thing. Like remember Ryan, like we were talking all off season like, okay, Dan Campbell was aggressive when this team was bad because he had to be. But the fact that this team got aggressive when up 22-0 against the Washington Commanders is like, hell yeah, buddy, let's ride.
It's the MCDC experience, right? Like, and it's so funny. So Monser, as a real quick tangent, Monser, former staff writer here for Pride of Detroit, awesome guy, awesome follow. He said on Twitter last night during the Monday Night Football game, oh my God, like Lions versus Vikings week 3 is the biggest game for Detroit since week 16 against the Cincinnati Bengals in the 2017 season. God. Do you remember that game?
Of course I do.
Okay.
It was the one that got Jim Caldwell fired, essentially.
And do you remember what 3 decisions got Jim Caldwell fired, I think?
Oh, man. Did he punt?
He punted twice on 4th and 1 near midfield. And he didn't throw the challenge flag on that Golden Tate.
I do remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
So coaching decisions, though, right? Like, this might be tangential, but it's like, this is the stuff that we've been waiting for so long, because that was the real reason why the Lions moved on from Jim Caldwell.
Yeah.
I don't think it had anything to. I don't think it really had a lot to do with player relations or anything, right? Like,
Yeah, it was all. They never won any big games too, right? Like that was they. It seems like they plateaued. It's hard to say it was because of game management decisions, but I do feel like that played a big part in it, right? When you're playing such high competitive games against high levels of competition, those things are magnified, right? Game of inches.
The margin for error is very, very slim, and then when you compound that with coaching decisions, you could be putting your team in a major hole at 100%. A major disadvantage. And the thing about Dan Campbell now is that we have confirmation that it's not just because he was trying to do everything he could to win a football game last year. No, like Dan Campbell is all about winning a football game on his terms. Yeah. And his terms are, I'm going to be super aggressive. And I think that's something that a lot of people can get behind.
Yep. All right. I want to go to a next question. We almost touched on it during our break, but I want to talk about it now. A lot of people are asking about injury related questions. And while we don't have a ton of injury news other than, what Dan Campbell has given us on Monday, which is, Hutch is fine. Doesn't sound like that's going to be a major issue. There does seem to be something going on with Charles Harris, which is something to keep an eye on. But we're kind of still waiting on news for Frank and Jonah, and those are kind of waiting things. John Kaminsky is another one to keep an eye on because it looks like he at least got x-rays after the game, and we don't know the results of that. But I think the larger point here is that what about the guys that we haven't even seen yet? What about Josh Pascal? What about Levi Onwuzurike? What about Romeo Okwara, Jerry Jacobs, and obviously Jamison Williams? First off, Ryan, I mean, again, this is all going to kind of be speculation on our part, but one, how excited are you to maybe get these guys on the other end of the bye week? And do you have at least maybe an inclination of someone you feel like he might be ready week 5, after that 4-week window for the IR guys?
Yeah, and to take that question and say, like, which guy do I want to see back
Sure.
most desperately? And it's tough. It's tough to make that decision because the Lions have depth, right? And especially these injured guys, if they can come back, it all of a sudden makes the Lions a very scary team. I think right now, more so than anything, they need depth at cornerback. And that's why I think it's really important for Jerry Jacobs to come back. I think if Jerry Jacobs can come back, then the Lions aren't operating on a razor's edge when it comes to cornerbacks week after week. You don't have to worry about having Mike Hughes lined up against Terry McLaurin because that came back to bite the Lions on Sunday. So I'm very encouraged and I'm very excited to get some of these guys back because what it'll mean for the Lions moving forward. I felt like I had a better question in mind for you, Jeremy, but like if there's a guy that can come back and another guy we didn't even mention, Afatu Melifonwu.
Sure. Yeah.
There's been a lot of Juju Hughes and there's been some pretty good Juju Hughes, especially on special teams and stuff. But is there just a guy that you think, man, this makes the Lions unit that much better?
I mean, Jamison Williams is the easiest answer, right? And like, we don't even know what that's going to look like because, I mean, if you're concerned about how DJ Chark has started, well, you throw Jamison Williams in there and suddenly you don't even need to worry about it. Like DJ Chark will probably be a nice decoy or a nice guy who, when eventually they have to shade guys over to JMO's side, maybe that's when he starts eating. But yeah, he just has the possibility to change everything about this offense, and I can't wait to see it. But again, that might be something that is a little bit further down the line. I don't think we see him because since he's a rookie, right, with no practice. Like even a guy like Josh Pascal, at least he got a little work in this offseason. We got nothing from JMO, so I would be surprised to see him before November. But yeah, so for the guys that we might see in October or probably late October at this point. I think Pascal is one of the more interesting ones. I don't really get a sense of how close he is to returning, but if Kaminsky is out for an extended period of time, that's kind of a natural plug and play right there, which is nice.
That big edge roll, yeah.
Right, but unfortunately, I mean, there's still like a 2-3 week potential gap in there, maybe even longer, where you might not have either. Which I don't really have the best answer there as to what you do, because Kaminsky has been low key one of the better defenders on the team so far. And then, I mean, here's the thing with Iffy. I think he probably returns this week, but I don't know what his role is. And I think I said this during the offseason. Where do you plug him in? I don't think he has a role on defense right away. I think it might just be special teams. And are you going to, I don't know, who do you knock off the game day roster? Chase probably gets knocked off, I guess.
Maybe, yeah. Or Juju Hughes. Maybe it's just a straight swap of safeties, but I think Iffy could just be a situational guy. You know what I mean? Like matchups. When they want to throw an extra safety out there to do their 2 safety looks or their 3 safety looks. So
we have almost seen none of that so far. Like they have not been using Juju at all.
How much of that do you think is personnel based?
It's a good point.
It might just be another, element to their defense that they can't really pull out until they have the right guys out there. So
yeah, I mean, if there's one thing we know about the Lions is they're going to match their personnel or their scheme to their personnel, right? And so if they don't have, Ifeatu Melifonwu and they think he can do something very specific, they're not going to try to just put Juju in there and do something different.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a good point. All right, let's move to a new question here. We're not going to talk about Lamar Jackson rumors because there's nothing to them. I would say it's very silly at this point in the offseason. As much as I want to dream about Lamar Jackson, the truth is they're going to franchise tag that guy if they can't come to a deal, and he's never coming to Detroit. As much as I like to joke about it all the time, he's never coming to Detroit.
Yeah, no, it's not happening.
You're supposed to say no, but what if? No, all right,
no.
Shoot,
come on,
darn it.
Hey, I said the Lions are getting good luck, and it's just because they're not going to have to deal with a lot of injuries moving forward. I'm not going to say good luck that they're going to hit the lotto at quarterback.
Fair enough. Hot Soup has a good question here. It says, it's been amazing to see the drives into TDs this season. Do you think that the ability of our running backs and push from the O-line is the main reason for that?
I think it has a lot to do with it,
sure.
Right? For as much as everyone wants to bag on Logan Stenberg, and he's certainly not far from reproach when it comes to saying that his game has had an impact on the Lions' ability to do things on offense, right? His ability in pass sets has been very, very bad. And it's something that he would even say that I think he would admit that he needs to clean up. But as a run blocker, holy moly, man. That guy, as you said, Jeremy, I think you pointed this out in a tweet, but it's this is why Logan Stenberg's going to keep playing moving forward. I get it. He, follows up a week where he gets a 0 pass blocking grade from PFF with a grade of 4.0. So I guess any improvement is improvement, but what he does to linebackers at the second level is startling.
It's always been kind of the scouting report on him, right? It's just he's this crazy mauler guy who's gonna take you to the ground and stay on you. And I don't know, if there's one thing that concerns me about the offense, it's that. And I know it's a very specific thing to be concerned about, but Jared Goff is not a good quarterback under pressure. Most quarterbacks aren't. And with the way Logan is getting beat, and it's not just that he's getting beat, he's getting beat quick.
Blown by.
That has the potential to give up a game-changing play. And we saw Jared Goff have a ton of fumbles last year. To his credit, he hasn't done it this year. But it's one of those things that kind of it's hanging in the back of your head. Is eventually this going to be a disastrous play? And I kept waiting for it to happen during that Washington game because he was just getting beat over and over again. I'm like, at some point he's going to get beat. The guy's going to hit Jared Goff's arm, and it's going to be going in the other direction.
Yeah, the thing that I just keep on seeing in my head as you're illustrating defenders just shooting into the Lions' backfield is when Jared Goff does the super slow-mo turn.
He almost did it last game.
He did do it last game.
He tried to do it last game.
Yes.
He didn't even get far.
No, he just basically turned around and took the sack rather than taking it. He
sure did.
Which, honestly, if I'm a quarterback, that's how I want to take my sacks. I want somebody to hit me from my back and put me down that way rather than slam me on my back. Dude, what are you doing? Anyways.
Next question.
Man.
Well, I was going to say, so the red zone stuff is a little interesting because 3 rushing touchdowns in week 1, all passing touchdowns in week 2. And so I think that shows maybe a little bit of balance. And honestly, the most impressive red zone touchdown, I think, was last week. And again, it was that touchdown drive. No, it was a different drive. It was the Josh run. The Lions get into a goal-to-go situation, first down. I think they're running the entire drive, and they pull off just a beautiful play action to Josh Reynolds in the back of the end zone. I know there's statistics out there that say, having a good run game doesn't make play action more effective. But in the red zone, I think it does matter a little bit, right? Because if you're a team that has this identity of we're going to be a run team, we're going to pound the rock, and then you okey-doke them in the red zone, that play works. That's how you score touchdowns in the red zone. How often do those play action passes work? Because it feels like it's an 85% success rate sometimes. And with a team that, again, the Lions' identity is trying to be this running team, and you score 3 running touchdowns in the opening week, well, yeah, of course Washington's going to bite extra hard on that play action.
Yeah, and I think even taking it back to Philly, though, when it's not just a traditional, hey, we're going to hand the ball off to our running back like Jamal Williams and have him just try to plow forward. It's we're going to do a pitch, and Jonah Jackson's
Yeah, the end.
pulling.
Right.
And I mean like that, yeah. I mean like getting creative just in the red zone when it comes to how you're gonna approach things, because I do think that teams will look at the Lions and say, hey, they want to be a power run team. If they can okey doke them, as you said, in the red zone, that's gonna be huge.
Yeah. Ben Johnson, man. He's
Yeah.
the trending up for him.
I want to ask you though, like when it comes to short yardage situations, are you still feeling like Jamal's the answer versus Craig?
It's an interesting question because so Jamal's been fine so far, but the one thing I don't think I've seen him do is make the first guy miss, like at all. Like no. I feel like his yards after contact has to be extremely small.
I don't. Yeah, it isn't. Yeah, it's not a very big number. But the other thing too is like I don't think Jamal's ever been that guy, right? Like
not really.
He's always been the I'll give you my shoulder guy.
But it can be kind of frustrating to watch right now because the offensive line is opening these massive holes, and you see Swift make the first guy miss all the time and turn those 7-yard runs into 20-yard runs. Jamal just like puts his head down and falls forward, which I mean, it's still like 8-9 yard,
8-yard runs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is it's not a bad run, but it's you just think like, oh man, if Swift was in there, he might still be running.
Right.
And Craig too. Like Craig's a little bit more shifty. He's still kind of a physical back, but when it comes to these third and short situations, it almost feels like the blocking, like the running back almost is irrelevant sometimes. Like just run forward because there's a hole there. Just run through the hole. I don't care if you fall backwards, fall forwards. Like there's enough room there with how well this offensive line is playing that I don't care. I don't care who's in there. Just get it.
Right. Yards after contact per attempt. Jamal Williams 1.96. DeAndre Swift 5.35.
There you go.
Craig Reynolds 4.33.
There you go. So maybe we see a little bit more Craig. I think the only reason really we saw him last week was just because Swift was extremely limited, but we know they like him a lot.
Swift might be limited moving forward.
I'm kind of interested
on a week-to-week basis. Do you think that they could pitch count him?
Certainly,
every once in a while.
Oh, for sure, no question. And I think they want to. Last year we saw them do it in the preseason, right? We saw them do it in training camp, like really try to protect him there. And it's unfortunate that they're already kind of having to resort to that, but I think they know how special Swift is, and Swift has proven how special he is in these first two games. My theoretical question here is, let's say they're like Swift, the knee or the ankle, I'm sorry, is swelled this week. Who becomes your like number one? Because I think I know what you want the answer to be, and maybe it is for them, but we haven't seen him yet. Do you think? I mean, Justin Jackson might have like the most close skill set to what Swift does. Do you think they might consider doing that with him?
I think Justin Jackson would get a lot of play.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because here's the thing. I think they know about their offensive line, especially when it's at full strength, that they can make those blocks at the second level, and we can have explosive plays out of the run game. I don't think you're going to, I mean, you can probably count the amount of explosive plays that Jamal Williams has had in his career, maybe like on one hand.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's no discredit to him. Like, I think he's an awesome runner in terms of what he can do. Like, we're poo-pooing on a guy who like runs hard and
scores touchdowns. I mean, that touchdown he had in week 1 where he just completely stonewalled. It was like, okay, I'll just go out here.
Boop, boop. Like just threw the old right hook at him. But like the thing is I think that they just want to be multi-dimensional. And I think that, like you said, Jeremy, like that's just who they want to be week to week.
Right.
We can throw any of these guys at you. So. Yeah.
All right. Let's close this thing out with one more question. I think I'll go back to Twitter. Actually, no, let's stay here. Let's talk about the Vikings game a little bit because I want to. I'm just going to kind of ask a more general question. How much more confidence do you have in the Lions in this week going on the road, their first road game against a divisional opponent, against a team that they almost beat twice last year? I think we have to remember. After watching the Eagles handle them pretty much that entire game. And one of the most interesting things I thought happened in that game is the Eagles almost handed that game away twice in the second half, and the Vikings couldn't do anything with it. They get a blocked punt, they get a deep interception, and turn that into 0 points. So for a Vikings team that dominated the Packers in week 1, and suddenly you're like, oh, these guys could win the division, how much less of an imposing team are they to you now?
I don't. All right. So reading what you wrote today, over at Pride of Detroit about just the Lions' chances in the NFC North.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're still very much of the belief that the Packers are the team to go through.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? It was like since 2011 or 2010, they've won 8 division titles.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Like, the North just goes through them. Right.
Yeah.
I know that I'm really not concerned about the Bears, and I think we just need to throw that out there and acknowledge that at any point in time.
Sure. I don't
think
mind
I think we're officially back to hashtag we own the Bears season this year.
Sure.
But with that being said, the Vikings, I think, are still a dangerous team because I think any offense that has Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, I mean, that's just something you have to worry about no matter what.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's their defense. I think it's the Vikings defense that is going to have to step up for them. I know I saw the tweet last night, like Harrison Smith. I know that he was being evaluated for...
He did indeed suffer a concussion, yeah.
Yeah, for a head injury. So that's something to monitor, especially with them playing on a short week now.
Yep.
In terms of the turnaround. So it's about the Vikings, and I know they have a young secondary. And what can the Lions dial up against them? And I know that's just hey, how confident do we feel about the Lions going into week 3? But like you said, Jeremy, this is a team that the Lions almost beat twice last year. They did beat once, but they almost beat them twice. And I definitely think that the Lions are in the mix for the NFC North. I'm not saying that they're going to win it. I'm not saying that it's going to be decided, at the end of December, but it definitely feels a lot more open than it's felt in the past. How many years?
A while. A while. Worth noting that the DraftKings Sportsbook line on this game dropped from 7.5 before Monday Night Football to 6 where it stands currently, which still seems maybe a little bit high, but we'll see. I think we'll leave it at that. I think we'll leave it at we'll see.